I don't want to have anything to do with that, I said. Moira looked at me, a look of confusion on her face. If he wants to play, great. If he doesn't, that's fine too. But I don't want to be involved in the invitation, I said. It's almost too much for me to think about. I leave the decision up to the universe. Moira had approached me about the possibility of singer-songwriter David Wilcox playing for our services last April when he would be here to play a concert for our Progressive Voices concert series. And to her surprise, when she asked me if I wanted him to play, I said, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And many of you know I'm a huge David Wilcox fan. I cannot overstate the influence his music has been on my life, going back more than 20 years. I hold his lyrics in my memory, his melodies in my heart, often returning to them when I am troubled or confused or in need of inspiration. I've followed his career closely. I own all of his recordings. I've shared his music with friends more times than I can count. I've seen him play at least 24 shows. I even proposed to my wife, Susan, at one of his concerts, with him playing a requested song in response. My love for his music is legion among people who know me well. We could say my life and my faith have been rooted in his music for decades. So why was I so hesitant to invest myself in the possibility of him playing at our services? Well, you may think it's because I didn't want to be disappointed if he said no. But I was clear even then that I didn't want to be disappointed if he said yes. So I had nothing to do with the invitation. And David Wilcox did say yes, and he did play for our services last April, and I was disappointed. I'm going to tell you a story of that disappointment, not to give you a bad impression of David or of me, though one or both may be the result. I share the story because it has a lovely ending, an important ending, an ending that made all the difference, at least for me, an ending that I will carry in my heart, much like I do David's music, an ending that may be important for you too, as we head into the holidays, during which we too may be disappointed by the people we love. A month or so before David was scheduled to play, I began thinking about what I might like to preach in his presence, and the thought of it filled me with dread. Already, I was putting too much pressure on myself to put together a memorable sermon, a sermon worthy of standing alongside his music. Having led services and offered sermons more than 700 times over the years, you'd think I wouldn't get wound up about one weekend, but I did. The week of the service, I had to communicate with David about what he might play. I wrote him a lengthy email inviting him into the creative process with me. I shared the text of the readings I had chosen. I told him what I thought the thrust of the service might be. I offered him some thoughts on the songs that I thought might work well and asked for his input. I also shared some about the importance his music has held for me through the years, including reminding him of his role in my marriage proposal and my delight and appreciation that he would be part of our services. Did I mention it was a lengthy email? Well, I heard nothing back for a very long time. Well, 36 hours seemed like a long time. So I wrote again, a much shorter email this time, with the song choices made for him and a request for his approval. A few hours later, he wrote back. I share the text of his message to me in its entirety. Hey, Mark, I have polished up those songs and I'm happy to play those. Looking forward to it. I just talked this into my iPhone and it typed it for me. I was pleased he was on board with my choices, but I was feeling embarrassed for my lengthy email, which he hadn't referenced in any way. I tried to show some restraint in my initial communication, but maybe I had overshared. I didn't want him to be uncomfortable thinking I was some kind of fanatic. Well, the Saturday of the first service with him, I was still struggling to complete the sermon. It took me up until the very last minute possible to put the final period in place before I had to get to church. Now, I often feel uncertain about what I write to share with you all, but as I drove here that Saturday afternoon, I was especially conflicted. The sermon I wrote was difficult and vulnerable, and I feared a bit too personal in spots. Thinking of David Wilcox hearing my words, I had to fight back the feeling that I might make a fool of myself. I know, looking back, the fear was misplaced, but it was real all the same. Upon arriving at church, the sounds of him warming up in the auditorium instantly added to my anxiety. I held off entering the hall, choosing to mill about in the gathering area instead. A few members greeted me, knowing my love for his music. They said, "Are you excited?" "That's one word for it," I said. When the sound check was done, I entered the auditorium to put my sermon on the pulpit. Moira approached, said, "Come meet David." I walked onto the stage where he was standing. Moira said, "David, this is our minister, Mark." As we walked toward one another, I wanted to play it cool. Here we were, just two fellow artists sharing a service. No big deal. I started to put out my hand, but I felt stupid doing that because, it just seemed like too formal of a greeting for my old friend, David. So I opened my arms to offer him an embrace. I have to tell you, it was too weird for words to be on this stage with David Wilcox. It's the stuff of dreams, Except it wasn't a dream, it was happening. But even weirder was what he did in response, or what I felt he did in response. When I put my arms around him in friendship, like I would any of you, he went completely limp. You know when you shake someone's hand with the culturally expected firm handshake, and he gives you the dead fish in return? That's what this hug was like. Now I felt really stupid, right? Big time stupid. I thanked him for being at the church and told him we were all looking forward to hearing him play. I don't recall what he said in return. He must have said thanks, but that was it. And then he was on his way back to my office until he needed to return to the stage for the start of the service. Soon I learned he was under the weather that night, really sick, in fact. Perhaps that's why he didn't choose to relate to me, someone who knows his music better than almost anyone on the planet. He was trying to conserve energy. We didn't say anything to each other the rest of the night. After he played his songs in the service, he retreated again to my office to lie down. All that time I had spent worrying about my stupid sermon, he hadn't heard a word. David's concert that night was good, as usual. I could tell he was sick, but it didn't seem to hamper his performance too much, nor had it in the service. Lots of people came, including some of my family, who surprised me by making the trip from Madison. They're fans as well. They asked me how it had been to work with him. Still feeling stupid and a little hurt, I focused on how he was not feeling well, how I was trying to respect his space, stay out of his way, and so on. They pressed me for more information, but moved on when they could tell I really just didn't want to talk about it. I went home that night embarrassed and disturbed, not looking forward to the next day all that much. I talked with Susan some about what had happened, and she shared about how she, upon arriving for the concert that night, had stopped by my office to bring David some echinacea. He said thanks, but also snapped, "Where's the bathroom in this place?" Even in my disappointment, I still defended him. "I think he's really sick," I said. Susan said, in a way that means that's no excuse. Sunday morning, I still felt icky about it all. David was still choosing to avoid me and me him. I didn't want to feed any idea he might have about me being someone he needed to avoid, right? I do have some pride, after all. Some pride. Like the pride I displayed when Moira suggested that we let David off the hook for the Sunday services in a goodwill effort to help him conserve his voice for the show he would play that night in Cedar Rapids. "Nope," I said. "He's treating this like a gig, so we will too." Some pride. Before the service, one of you asked me if I felt like a kid in a candy store. "Not exactly," I said. A few moments later, when David and I were both on stage, he said, "That opening hymn is beautiful." "Yes, it's a Peter Mayer song," I said. "I figured you might like it." I had chosen Blue Boat Home because having seen David play a show with Peter several years ago, I knew he was familiar with his music. The two have a similar musical style, though I now acknowledge to myself Peter is much more friendly in person. The 9:30 service began and I was bumming. I was putting a lot of energy into feeling sorry for myself, angry even. I didn't much like my sermon. I wasn't liking David. I wasn't much liking myself. Soon the congregation was standing, singing Blue Boat Home, and I tried to focus on the hymn, inviting myself to be more awake to the present moment than to my unmet expectations. I looked out at the congregation making their way through the song, shifting from foot to foot, as if in some kind of simple, unchoreographed dance, the way we often do when we sing a familiar hymn. And then we came to the line, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls. And I really looked at you standing there singing that. I really looked, rocking back and forth, as if we were together on some big ship, which of course we are, singing together despite all the reasons not to. Making our way by the light of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I looked out, I saw my people, my fellow travelers, people with whom I have had the privilege of sharing much over the years, my family, people with whom I have shared celebrations and sadness, laughter and loss, passion and possibility, people I love. And the empty I was feeling, it suddenly gave way and filled to gratitude for all that I actually have in my life, all that I have right in front of me, all that I get to see and experience and share. No longer did I need to focus so intently on whether David Wilcox was paying attention to me or to our church in the ways that I thought he should. Instead, I was reminded to focus on all that I should be paying attention to, all the life that is mine to savor. It was a poignant, wisdom-filled moment. And that's why I shared this story with you. Because even in this season of thanks, we may too easily miss the things that we could be grateful for. We may put too much emphasis on how people are letting us down, on how we aren't getting what we think we deserve, on how our needs are not being met the way we think they should be. And we can miss what is right in front of us. But if we look around, we really look around, taking in all that we truly have, we may find a life so bountiful that it can bring tears to our eyes, just as it did when I paid attention to the beauty of a simple hymn sung on a Sunday morning with you, my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls. This Thanksgiving, may you too find yourself among your ship's companions, whether in your presence or in your mind's eye, buoyed by the beauty of all you do get to see, all you do get to share, all that you get to sing. For there truly is much to treasure on our journey together in this, our beautiful blue boat home. Won't you stand and sing with Bruce, 1064.